Hi all, let's have a look at another amazing game from the Anatoly Karpov match against Yifan. So this was a friendly match, 6 rapid games played in Harbin, China. Many thanks to Pixelplay, by the way, for the background. That's tagged with China and is in the public domain, it seems. So nice background, I thought. D4 from Anatoly Karpov. Yifan played E6, inviting a French defence. Now Karpov declined that, going into a C4. So this is either going to be a Nimzo Indian or a Queen's Indian on the next move. So knight F3 is usually entering into Queen's Indian territory, and we transpose now into the Rogozin variation. So bishop B4, it looks like a hybrid of a Queen's Gambit declined in a Nimzo. The Rogozin variation, bishop G5, H6, and white takes on F6. Queen B3, hitting that bishop. C5, C takes, E takes, A3, bishop takes, queen takes. Now B6, E3, black castles, bishop E2, knight C6, and now here Karpov plays D takes C5, and he's actually leaving black with hanging pawns here, potentially. It looks a little bit dangerous. Now black took on C3, so this position, sometimes if they're fixed they can be a liability. We see the move rook B1, and now we see rook B5, and it's trying to fix these hanging pawns, which is a very common strategy against them. C4, so kind of job done there, and it justifies white's opening. Is this enough of a positional advantage for Karpov? Well, actually, after castles, bishop A6. This is a very, very interesting move now. Rook C5. It's available to the rook. It does hit the knight, and it does mean potentially this knight will grab the D4 square, which it does now. Knight E7. Knight D4. So this starts to look like a dominating position, with Yifan having kind of what I call frozen pawns. And I don't know if you remember, there was a very instructive game we covered on the channel where Yifan did the same thing to Judith Polgar, sort of froze her pawns and won pawn after pawn. So will the same thing happen to her at the hands of Anatoly Karpov? If you look at black's position, it's starting to be a bit passive. So rook A5 now, rook D6, a little bit awkward, and white gets that B file. So controlling that B file is showing that white's really got a massive grip on this position, especially with the monster knight on D4 here. Rook A8, very passive rooks from black. Yeah. Bishop F3. Now, although there's no immediate entry point, this is nasty pressure on A8, which is accentuated with rook B4. Now, potentially threatening rook A4 to kick the bishop, and then either win A7. Or even, yeah, there's a pin here against the D5 pawn. Rook takes C4 later, and we see that now immediately after bishop C8. Rook takes C4, just winning the first pawn now. So fruit is starting to drop from the tree of frozen pawns. So these pawns now are isolated still, and they're still kind of vulnerable. The D5 one especially. Bishop G4, Rook C7, the rook on the 7th. Bishop takes, G takes. A6. Black is still passive. Now, rook b8 might be a mild concern. It's addressed with rook a4 now, giving b4. If rook b8, rook b4. Rook c8. Rook takes, knight takes. And now back to a5. So simultaneous pressure on black's two weaknesses. Black's really been tied down to pawn structure here. And now the kings come towards the centre for the endgame. Now here actually there's rook a4, knight g8, c4, dissolving that pawn, taking out a centre pawn. The king comes to the centre, and now f5, h5, fg, fg, rook c2, protecting the second rank, and preparing now this king march, king f4. The knight's kicked. And now e4, these centre pawns are quite mobile. Rook c4 there, protecting the knight. Check. Knight e5. And now the black king is driven back. Check. winning another pawn. A4, outside pass pawn. Another pawn drops. Yes, the tree of frozen pawns has firmly been shook in this game. Black is only left with one pawn now. It's really all over, bar the shouting. After rook a8, the game ended here. Yifan resigned. This is pretty futile. E6 would win that knight next, for example. So a very, very instructive, controlled game there. Very positional opening. Karpov sought the positions which he could really handle well. Black really didn't get much counterplay and had frozen pawns, which, as I say, it's like a tree which can be shaken for those pawns to come off later. So the hanging pawns, though, it's a very instructive game for hanging pawns. Albeit it's a rapid game, though, so bear that in mind as well. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.